Hello everyone, it's me again, Staypuft64, and I haven't actually uploaded on this channel for a while, and the reason is because for the past year or so I've been working on this video because I want to do something different on this channel from now on. I want to start doing game reviews, but these are not really game reviews, but it's more like look backs at games I've played in my life, you know, but that's how it is to me, but y'all might not see it as that. But yeah, this is going to be something I've been wanting to do for quite some time now, and I feel like there was no better way to start than with one of my #1 favorite video game franchise of all time, which is of course Sonic the Hedgehog. Like y'all should know that. I'm not like Sonic has always been part of my life, you know, for better or for worse. But yeah, I wanted to start talking about the games in this franchise, you know. And obviously we're gonna start with the first game. I don't have it physically, so I can't show it, but yes. And before we start, I just want to say that these types of videos aren't gonna be as common as other things I do, like I do podcasts and vlogs mostly, but these little review videos or kind of retrospectives, I'm not really sure, but yeah, these are gonna be like every so often whenever I get the chance. So you might not see these as much as other videos, but I just wanted to kind of get that out. And before we actually get into how the game is and all that, I just want to talk about a brief history of how I got into this franchise, why I love it so much, and just some other things, you know. But either way, with that out of the way, let's get started.
So, I was born in 2002, but despite growing up in the mid to late 2000s, I was only able to play NES games on this bootleg Wii rip-off console. The reason for that was, well, because my mom was poor back then and we didn't have a lot of money, and I always fell for these things. I mean, hell, the only real game console I had at the time was the GameCube back in 2006, but because my mom saw me constantly raging at Super Mario Sunshine, which was one of my favorite games of all time, and was actually the first video game I ever played in my life, but we'll talk more about that in a future video. Either way, she sold my GameCube because of it, and believe it or not, I still give her shit for it to this very day. But because of that, the only way I could play any games at all back then were by going to my two older cousins' house, because they had a PS2 and they had a lot of games for it. I'm talking like Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3, Kingdom Hearts, Mortal Kombat Armageddon, Shaolin Monks, the Sly Cooper series, Jak and Dexter trilogy, and most importantly, Sonic the Hedgehog. Which games, you ask? Sonic Heroes, Sonic Riders, and Shadow the Hedgehog. Yeah, so technically the first Sonic game I ever played was Sonic Heroes, and then I went to Sonic Riders. Never played Shadow the Hedgehog though until I modded my Wii U to play GameCube games back in 2016, but when we get to that game in the future, let's just say there were a lot of things I did not remember about that game.
But either way, that's how I got into the franchise. But how did I get into the Genesis games, you ask?
Well, around 2008 or 9, I believe, I got a blue DSi XL actually with New Super Mario Bros. DS as a birthday present from my mom's ex-boyfriend back then. And in 2010, I went to Walmart with my family.
And you want to know what happened that day?
They had a copy of Sonic Classic Collection, which was a compilation of the first 3 Sonic games, including Sonic and Knuckles and Sonic 2 and 3. But you know what my 8-year-old self decided to do?
Steal it. Yes, I stole it. Look, I was 8 years old at the time. I didn't really know I didn't really know any better, and I was like really desperate to get the game because I was like, oh my god, because we didn't have a lot of money back then. But yeah, that's how that happened, and I just can't believe I did that. I still don't know what the hell I was thinking that day. But there you go. But yeah, after I did that, I spent the entire day playing through that collection, most of all the Sonic games on there, and on my DSi. Well, actually, this is not mine. Actually, it's actually my brother's. He gave it to me about a year ago. But either way, that's how I got into the franchise, and it's made me to the person I am today. Not a criminal, obviously, but yeah, Sonic fan. And ever since, I've been collecting as many Sonic games that I can, playing through it. But yeah, that's pretty much my history with the franchise. That was pretty much it. And now I'm really gonna get into the actual game. Like what you're actually here to see. And for this parts of what I'm gonna describe on this game's history to you is gonna be taken from Wikipedia's article. So if some parts sound the same, that's why. It's because that's how I just want to do it. That's how I work with that. Don't judge me, okay?
So, of course, every Sonic fan like myself knows the origin story of how our blue friend came to be. But for those who don't know this and want to get into the series, here's a pretty simple story on how it was created. So, the year was 1990, and Sega had ordered its studio to create a game that would also create a mascot for their company. And this was kind of already a thing with Alex Kidd, but they felt he was too similar to Mario, apparently, and wanted something different. And their president, Hayao Nakayama, wanted to make a character that could be as iconic as Mickey Mouse. And they had some competition with Nintendo, who was obviously blowing everyone away at that time, especially with Mario 3's release, and Sega wanted to be just as big as them. And although they kind of were successful with that with Genesis ports of arcade games, they felt that would not be enough. And many different designs and ideas for how the game would work were thrown around, like one being a rabbit character that could grab things with its ears. And this would actually be later incorporated into one of their other games, Rise Star.
Yeah, one of Sega's most abandoned series along with many of their other ones.
But either way, in that game, instead of a rabbit, you're a star character that can use its arms and not its ears to stretch and maneuver around stages in that game. But despite being developed by the same people that created Sonic 1, which is obviously Sonic Team, it's kind of not really like Sonic at all. It's really its own thing. But either way, back to Sonic. So, after a couple of other ideas were thrown around for how he would look, one of the other Sega members, Naoto Oshima, came up with the idea for a hedgehog character. And this obviously was the one that succeeded. But in some weird reason, Naoto Oshima admitted at one point that he came up with Sonic's basic design, by combining Felix the cat's head onto Mickey Mouse's body? But either way, as strange as that sounds, another weird thing about Sonic's design is his shoes. They were actually inspired by Michael Jackson, apparently, because he wore these like red boots in one of his album covers, and they decided to go with that kind of design. And another thing is that they made the colors of the shoes red and white because of Santa Claus, who Naoto Oshima actually believes, and I'm not joking, he actually believes he's the most famous character in the world. Another thing about Sonic is that they gave him the ability to jump and spin at the same time, so you could attack and jump at the same time with one button. And another thing is that he was going to be originally called Mr. Needle Mouse, but obviously that name sounds weird and dumb, so they changed it to Sonic. And another thing was that they were gonna make him really stand out as a character by giving him a lot of different things, like giving him fangs like a vampire, being in a rock band, and even having a human girlfriend named Madonna, apparently. But Sega of America decided to change this so he could be more of a simple character like Mario, I guess. And another thing is that they also felt that most people in America would not know what a hedgehog is. So they even wanted to recreate him entire, like change him up completely. But they decided to just make a few different design changes so he would look more normal, I guess. And the main villain of this series, it was called Dr. Eggman in Japan and Dr. Robotnik in America, because Sega of America and Japan had a really big problem with either name. Apparently, I don't know. That's what I've seen.
So, that's pretty much the story on how Sonic 1 was created, and I wanted to get a little deeper into it, but I feel like if I was to do that, we're going to be here for over an hour. So, we're just going to get right into the game itself, you know, the part that you've been waiting for. I don't know why I said we, but yes. Let's just get into it, right?
So, the first thing we see upon loading the game up is the Sega logo, and we hear that iconic voice clip we know so well.
And did you know that that voice clip actually takes up over 1/8 of the cartridge's memory?
According to this Reddit post, apparently. And after that, we get the message Sonic Team Presents, which would actually become Sonic's development team's name for the rest of the franchise to this very day. And here it is, the title screen for Sonic the Hedgehog.
So is it just me, or does Sonic's hand here look really weirdly proportioned? Just me? Yeah, okay, what? Okay, yeah.
And now for the story of Sonic the Hedgehog.
So in Sonic's world...
Look, I don't know Sonic's world's name is, okay, so I'm just gonna have to call it Sonic's World because why the fuck not, you know? But back to the story.
So, the story of Sonic the Hedgehog is that the evil Dr. Ivo Robotnik, aka Eggman, is kidnapping all of the animals on the planet and turning them into little robots he calls badniks. And obviously, as Sonic, it's your job to take them all down and free the animals inside, and to stop whatever Robotnik's plans are, which I don't know what it is other than getting the legendary Chaos Emeralds.
So, now that we've gotten the story out of the way, let's get into the actual gameplay and everything else. Okay? Here we go.
So, Sonic the Hedgehog's gameplay is... it's like your regular platformer, except there's one element that made it stick out from many other games at the time. And it's his speed, because as we all know, Sonic is run at lightning fast speeds. But in the first Sonic game, it's not really that fast because you don't have a move that would be introduced in the sequel that I'll get into when we get there. But yeah, so the way you build up speed and move around is by obviously you run, you hold right to move around or left sometimes, and Sonic will start to build up speed, and if you keep on running and all that, and you will build up more speed. And another way you can do this is by pressing down on the D-pad to cause Sonic to roll into a ball like we mentioned earlier, and by doing this you can have him roll into enemies or just roll down a slope or a ramp and all that, and you will go really fast. And this is kind of like a thing that most people already know, but like I said, not everyone is a Sonic fan, and this is how pretty much the gameplay works. And you can also attack enemies by jumping, because when you jump you roll into a ball as well. And this can be used pretty effectively because you can also bounce off of enemies, and if you can do it right, you can actually chain your jumps together, like hitting more enemies at the same time. And that's pretty much the gameplay of how Sonic works. Pretty simple, really. So, another aspect of the gameplay I just forgot to bring up was how you survive in this game. You do this by collecting these golden rings, and they act as your lifeblood, so to speak, you know. So whenever you get hit by an enemy or touch spikes or something, you can pick them up even when you lose them, but they'll only be around for a few seconds, otherwise they'll just vanish. But don't worry, because there's a lot more rings all around the levels, And you can also break these monitors that give you either 10 rings or even an extra life, or a shield power-up that lets you take another hit without losing your rings. Or you can even get this invincibility monitor that totally isn't like the Starman from Mario. But either way, it covers you in these little stars, I believe, and obviously you become invincible, like I said, just like the Starman.
So, now that we've gone over how the gameplay works, let's get into all the different air levels and zones that Sonic the Hedgehog has to offer. Starting with...
So, the first zone is Green Hill Zone, you know, the most overused area in the entire fucking franchise. But either way, it's iconic for a reason, not just because it's the first zone in the series, but for many other reasons, such as the aesthetic. It has these amazing blue backgrounds, the trees, the checkerboard patterns on the ground, and also because of its design. I mean, there's just like so many ways you can speed up here, and everything is so well laid out. Also, each zone is broken up into 3 levels, or acts as the game calls them. 2 of these acts are regular levels, while the third one ends in a fight against Robotnik. So for the first boss fight, Robotnik swings this brown checkered wrecking ball, I think that's what it's supposed to be. So obviously you attack him by jumping on him, and if you're pretty good, you can take him down really fast.
So that's pretty much Green Hill Zone, and before we move on to the next zone, we need to talk about the special stages.
So when you grab 50 rings or more, you will see this giant ring at the end of the stage, and when you jump into it, you are then taken to the special stage. So in these special stages, you maneuver Sonic around this constantly spinning and horrifically disorienting stage, while you see this trippy background full of birds and fish? And you have to guide Sonic throughout the stage in order to get the center of the stage to get one of the Chaos Emeralds, the main collectibles of the game.
And I just want to get this out of the way right now. I really don't like these special stages at all. And I'm about to tell you why. And why I think they're not good.
Either way, my main problem with these damn special stages is that it's so difficult due to the stage spinning so much, and it's very easy to mess up because you have how you have to control Sonic, and most of the time you're playing these special stages, you're mainly just going to be falling into these gold spears and not getting your damn Chaos Emerald, which is highly annoying.
And may I remind you that these Chaos Emeralds are actually required in order to get the good ending of this game, which isn't even really that amazing at all, and not even worth it. But either way, that's how the special stages work. And now, let's get to the zone after Green Hill Zone, which is... You know everything I said about Green Hill Zone earlier? Well, Marble Zone is the complete opposite of that. And here's what I mean.
So, Marble Zone, like I've said before, is literally the complete opposite of Green Hill Zone for many reasons. The main reason for me is the design. You know how I said that Green Hill Zone allows you to speed through it if you're good enough? Well, in Marble Zone,
you can't.
Seriously though, you're pretty much just forced to play they want you to. Well, except for the second and third act where you can kind of go a different way, but still, you really don't have a way to speed through it unless you really know how the levels are laid out. Another problem I have is the fact that every time you're going through this zone, you're always having to stop dead in your tracks, moving for something to move, like these spiky chandeliers, these sliding platforms, these damn spikes that come out of fucking nowhere. And then there's also these really annoying fireballs that shoot out from the wall. And then in the second and third act, there's these things that shoot lava down at you. While you're standing on these blocks you have to stand on because there's lava on the ground. And sometimes the lava launches you upward and then you have to jump off of it to get to a higher platform. And most of the time I end up missing the end of the platform and end up falling in the damn lava. And then I have to rush my ass back to where the block first showed up. And also try not to die from the fucking lava that's everywhere. It's just really annoying.
So what I'm trying to say is, I really don't like Marble Zone, like, at all, but it's not like I'm trying to hate on it completely. Like, I'm not trying to say everything about it is bad, but there's just so many things about this zone I really don't like. But that being said, there are a lot of things I do like about the zone, which is...
So first is the music. You know what you're hearing right about now? I really like how the music here fits with the theme of Marble Zone, which is, what do you call it?
Gothic architecture.
Yeah, that. I really like that as well. Another thing I like about this zone is the lava, and I know I talked about how annoying it can be, but I really like how it looks. It's well animated, it's very vibrant and colorful, and it goes well with the
Gothic architecture.
And now for the boss fight of Marble Zone.
I don't like it.
So in this boss fight, Robotnik is shooting fireballs at you and they cover up the platform you're standing on, and you have to jump to the other side while trying to hit Robotnik at the same time. Now, my main problem with this boss fight is the fact that there's these fireballs that also shoot upwards at you from this lava in the center, and most of the time they hit me, and I'm also trying not to fall into that lava in the center, and then somehow I end up getting hit by it anyways, and I end up dying. Look at this, I got a game over for f***'s sake. Oh my god. That's terrible.
But to be fair, this is only a personal thing, like, it's just a problem I have with this boss fight. It's not really hard, but it's just very tricky, and it's pretty easy to mess up if you're not careful. But either way, that's Marble Zone, and next up is... So, after dealing with Marble Zone and the way it is, we are now in a more, how do you say, average zone?
So, one thing I find weird about this zone is the aesthetic. Like, it's a city in the mountains, but it's also a casino, kind of, in a way. But either way, in this zone there are a bunch of these, what do you call these? Bumper balls? And there are also plenty of springs everywhere, because this is Spring Yard Zone, not Bumper Ball Zone.
So, you know how I criticized Marble Zone for being extremely slow and not really able to speed through? Well, here in Spring Yard Zone, it's kind of like that as well, but you can also speed through it if you want to, but not really. And here's why I say that.
So one of the reasons I say this is because you're mostly speeding and stopping through these levels like you would do in Marble Zone, but here you kind of have more ways to speed through it. But one of the things that can slow you down here are these parts where you have to jump on these platforms that are always moving up and down. But my only problem with this, however, is the fact that for some reason I always end up jumping at the wrong time and somehow I get crushed and then I f***ing die from that as a result. But this is only a minor problem that I have though. And another thing that could slow you down are these parts where you're going down this ramp and then there's these big spiked balls that are in the way and you kind of have to wait a few seconds for them to move. And then there's these spike things that spin around really fast and you gotta hurry to not get hit by them. And then there's these big spiked balls that move in circles really fast where you gotta avoid them by jumping to this tiny platform, and it can be pretty tricky if you're not careful. And one of the ways you can build up speed here is by spinning through these curved platforms or whatever they're called, and they can launch you upward to help you get to a higher area, I guess. And one thing I find weird about Spring Yard Zone is that there's these hidden paths that have a couple of rings, but they don't lead you anywhere. Like, what's that all about?
And now here is the boss fight of Spring Yard Zone, and it's not very hard actually compared to Marble Zone, but it's also pretty tricky as well. But it's nothing too complicated. So let's get into that.
So in this boss fight, Robotnik has this spike that comes out of his ship, and he uses it to take off parts of the platform that you're standing on. And all you really have to do is take him down before you fall off the platform, and that's really it actually. And that is Spring Yard Zone.
And now, the next zone. You all know what it is, and in case you don't, prepare yourself. Here we go. So, Labyrinth Zone. For those who don't know, this is actually the zone that most people that played this game seem to hate with a passion. But honestly, I don't really hate it as much as other people do. But however, I do have a lot of problems with it. So, let's get into that.
So, let's just start with the things that I actually do like about Labyrinth Zone, which is the music. It's really nice, and I feel it really fits with the aesthetic of Labyrinth Zone, which I like as well, but it looks more like an underwater temple than a labyrinth when you really think about it.
And now for the things that I don't like about Labyrinth Zone.
So, one of the many many things that I don't like about Labyrinth Zone is the fact that it drags on for quite a while. Like, this was already a problem in Marble Zone, but it almost feels worse here, and that's because of the one thing that almost everyone, including me, seems to hate about Labyrinth Zone.
The water. So for those who don't know, one of the things that doesn't mix well with Sonic the Hedgehog at all is water. And here's why.
Yes, the water is one of the main reasons why Labyrinth Zone seemingly drags on forever. And another problem with the water is the fact that just like in Marble Zone, you're constantly jumping onto small platforms, avoiding all kinds of different traps and enemies, such as these spears that come out the walls just like in Marble Zone, but you can actually see them here. And then there's also these spinning spike balls that are extremely tricky to dodge, especially if you have no rings. And there are also these heads that shoot fireballs, I think they're supposed to be, and they can be a real pain in the ass, man, I'm serious. And on top of that, there are also these little platforms that when you jump on them, they can lift you upward and possibly kill you if you're not careful. And then there are times where you have to find these buttons that open up pathways, and some of them are pretty tricky to find. Like, there's one that requires you to break this ring monitor to reveal the button, and it's like, how am I supposed to know that that button was supposed to be there? Seriously.
And may I remind you that you're constantly going through this water that slows you down dramatically as you're trying to avoid all these different traps and enemies. And on top of that, there's an even more frustrating problem that Labyrinth Zone creates due to this water being there. So let's get into that.
So another big problem with the water is the fact that you only have a certain amount of time to be in the water before you see a number counting down and you hear this horrific countdown music and you have to hurry up and get out of the water or grab these air bubbles
to avoid drowning.
But nothing, and I mean nothing, is more blood boiling than when you see that number countdown and you just barely miss the air bubbles or you barely get to a platform, and then this can happen.
But on top of all those problems, on top of everything that pisses me off about Labyrinth Zone, there's still another thing that pisses me off. And that is, of course, the boss fight. Let's get into it.
So, in this boss fight, Robotnik tries to get away from you and you simply just have to chase him down. My problem with this is the fact that you have to keep jumping upward while you try to avoid all these little enemies, spears, spikes, and many other different problems, and also try not to let the water rise up all the way or else you're going to end up drowning. Thankfully this boss fight is pretty short, but this boss fight is still very, very tricky. And if this is your first time playing the game, it can be very hard for you. But it's pretty easy once you get used to it.
So now, for the next zone, which is a whole lot less frustrating. So thankfully I won't have to rant as much as I did about Labyrinth Zone. So here we go. So, Starlight Zone is actually my personal favorite zone in Sonic 1, but it's not the best designed zone actually. That would actually be Green Hill Zone, but I like Starlight Zone a lot more for different reasons, so let's get into that.
So one of the things I like is the aesthetic, and unlike Springyard Zone, this one actually makes sense because it's a city at night. And another thing I love is the music. It really fits with the zone and it's got this like really jazzy feel to it, and I love that.
So now let's talk about the way the levels are designed in this zone and all the different kinds of obstacles and enemies you're gonna face. So let's talk about that.
So one of the things I find weird about Starlight Zone is the level design. Like because there are some like really weird things they put here, like these fireballs that are on the wall, you know, like the ones in Marble Zone, but except it makes way less sense here. Like, why is this here? Why are there so many of these ramps that go up everywhere? Why are there's fans that push you in different directions? Like, why can't I go that way? What's over there? Another thing I find weird is that they're just randomly placed bottomless pits that you can fall into if you're not careful, and that can get really f***ing annoying at times. But it's not really a problem, it's just a minor inconvenience. Another thing I find weird about this zone is that there are also these seesaws with a spike ball that you have to jump onto to launch you to a higher platform. These are fine, but the third act is full of these things and it can be painfully tedious. I mean it. And there are also some enemies you have to deal with, like these Orbinauts that have these spikes that don't really do anything. But then you have these bombs that are scattered everywhere in this zone. And when they explode, they scatter their pieces everywhere, and it is just really hard to avoid, and it's just awful.
And now for the boss fight of Starlight Zone.
So this boss fight is actually pretty tricky, but it is nowhere near as difficult as Labyrinth Zone. But either way, in this boss fight, there are 4 of these seesaws, and Robotnik is shooting these spiked ball time bombs on them. And you have to hurry and launch them back at him before they blow up on you. And again, it's not hard, but pretty tricky, and oh my god, is that really it? Oh wow, what a downgrade from Labyrinth Zone.
And that is Starlight Zone. It's pretty straight to the point, and there's not really much else to say about it. However, the final zone is an entirely different story, and that zone is... Now, if you thought that Labyrinth Zone was annoyingly difficult, you clearly have not seen Scrap Brain Zone. Let's get into that.
I am serious, this zone just wants you dead. It's easily the hardest zone in this game, and I mean it. Everywhere you look, everywhere you go, there are just so many different obstacles and enemies you have to go through here, and it is just ridiculous. And here's the main thing I'm going to have to explain before we actually get into this zone. Each act in this zone, or level, is entirely different from each other, so strap yourselves in because I've got a lot to say about this zone. And here we go. So first, let's just talk about the things that I do like about this zone, just like I did with Marble Zone and Labyrinth Zone. So the main thing I like about this zone is that each act is like a different phase of the zone. You know how the first act you're outside Robotnik's base, and then the second act you're inside the base. And the third act is actually really different, but we'll get to that later. Another thing I like about this zone is the music. It really gives off this futuristic vibe that it has. And now we're going to talk about all the different kinds of obstacles and enemies you're going to face in the first act. So you know how I said that this zone is extremely difficult? I wasn't joking about that. Yeah, it is way more difficult than Labyrinth Zone, but the good thing is there is no water to slow you down, so this zone doesn't drag on as badly as Labyrinth Zone. So that's great, I guess. But back to Scrap Brain. So the first thing you're going to notice about this zone is the level design. It is full of different obstacles and enemies, such as these platforms that will drop you into a bottomless pit if you don't jump fast enough. And then there's also these caterpillars that you have to jump over, and then there's these pipes in the ground that shoot fire at you, and then there are these spinning platforms that can also drop you down if you're not fast enough to jump off of them. And on top of that, there are also these weird brain beacon things that shoot electricity at you, and that can get really annoying. And then there are a few of these visible platforms that take a few seconds to show up, and then you have to hurry before they disappear again and drop you into the bottomless pit again. And then there are these big robots that throw bombs at you, and that is really annoying. And oh my god. And that's only the first act. We still got the second and third act to talk about. And I just can't believe this. You know what I mean? So now let's talk about the second act of Scrap Brain Zone. So in the second act, you're actually inside the base of Scrap Brain Zone, I believe, and the difficulty really cranks up here. It does. Like, you know all the different obstacles I mentioned in the first act? Well, now they are everywhere, and on top of that, there are some really annoying things that they add in this level that I'm gonna get into, so let's talk about that. God help me. So like I said before, there are so many things that are trying to kill you here. It's insane to me that they expect you to get through all this. Like, there are all the things from the first act that are here, but now they're in every single part of the level. And now there are these buzzsaws that come from the ceiling, from the ground, and on top of that, there are now these treadmills that you have to go through while avoiding these buzzsaws, and these treadmills are everywhere. And on top of that, the fucking bombs are back from Starlight Zone, and they're just as bad here as they were there. And last but not least, there are these drum barrels that can go up and down in an instant and can crush you if you aren't fast enough, and they are easily the main problem I have with this zone. And thankfully, I somehow managed to survive the second act of this zone, and we are done with it. Now, normally this is the part where I would talk about the boss fight of this zone, but as you're about to see, there is no boss fight in this zone, and here's why. So when you actually manage to beat the second act, you see Robotnik on the other side laughing at you, and I don't know why, but then he jumps on this button destroying the platform that you're standing on, and suddenly you fall into the third act, which is Labyrinth Zone again? Yeah, now we're back in Labyrinth Zone for some reason. Only now the place is white and the water is purple. But either way, this level is nowhere near as hard as the other levels from Labyrinth or Scrap Brain Zone. So after going through this level for a bit, we see a bunch of these springs, and when we jump onto one, it brings us to the final zone. Yeah, the final boss fight where Robotnik actually has its own zone. So let's talk about that. Sadly though, this final boss isn't really as challenging as the other boss fights. Hell, I'd argue it's almost easier than the boss fight in Green Hill Zone. But let's just get into it. So for the final boss, Robotnik switches around these tubes going up and down, and then these electric balls will come down from the ceiling, and you have to dodge them while also hitting Robotnik from the sides of the tubes that he's in. It's pretty tricky but not hard at all, and oh my god, that is so disappointing. But after you defeat him, he flies off somewhere, and that's it. And that's it. That's the entire game right there. But there is also the ending, you know. Yeah, not really that special of an ending, isn't it? But it is pretty funny seeing Robotnik here stomping the end text in rage, though. So, and where'd my hair go? Either way, so that's Sonic the Hedgehog. And in case you couldn't tell, I'm about to say something that most people have said about this game in recent years. And as much as I don't like to say it, after playing this game for about 3 years, I don't think it's aged very well. But here's the thing. And honestly, I'm not surprised, because obviously for the first game in the franchise, it's pretty obvious it's gonna have things that don't age well, especially compared to the sequel and other games in the series. But despite the flaws in Sonic 1, I still think it's a decent game to go through nowadays. And I know it must have been phenomenal when it came out back then, but it's just not very good now. But it's not bad either, so I would still recommend it, even if it has some flaws. But at that point, I would just rather play the sequel or the third game. But if you really want to get into the series, you can play the first game if you want to, or you can try out the sequel, which is what we're going to get to whenever that may be. So, I guess this is the end of the video. But before we end things, I kind of want to take a minute to talk about a few things. First off, I'm really sorry this video took a long time to come out. Originally, I had started this around late 2018 and was supposed to get it done before summer of 2019, but I kind of lost track, and you know, I had to go through school, and I was just being lazy, so that's why I kind of took a while. But yeah, I just wanted to apologize for that. But another thing is, this is going to be the type of content you guys are going to be seeing from now on this channel, because I've always wanted to do these types of videos, but I don't know what took me so long to really want to do it. But yeah, and it's the start of a new year. You know, we're in the 2020s, we're in a new decade, so I'm very excited for what this year's going to be like in terms of my videos, and I'm hoping that the next videos I make won't take as long as this one, but I'm pretty sure they won't. And if you decide to stick around after this, you can be excited. Tune into my later videos. And another thing I want to say is, I kind of wish I would have started doing YouTube like this back in 2016 when I started this channel, because, you know, with the way YouTube's been and the different policies and the way things have changed. So my chances of becoming successful are very slim now, but I'm still gonna try. I don't care. I'm still gonna see if I can build something out of this channel, and I'm hoping this video at least kickstart it. You know, like it'll at least bring my channel up just a little bit, and I don't know. We'll see what happens. And I'm glad you guys decided to stick around and watch this whole thing. And thanks for watching. I hope you liked it, and I'll be seeing y'all next time.